Hello everyone, it's time for our live stream and I have zero topic for today. So thanks for tuning in and I'll see you again in 2 weeks. I'm kidding. I don't have a topic, so we were going to be answering your questions today. But I did want to let you know that next weekend is Reefapalooza Dallas and Aquashella Chicago. So if you're near either of those two places, now is your chance to go and attend and enjoy a really fun event. Jackie, come here. Come here, let me take off your collar. Here you go. We'll take this off so it doesn't make noise. Good girl. Good girl. So we're out in the studio today. Paul, you are literally the first. You did it. Martin, close second. So we're out in the studio this week. Last week we were in front of the reef tank and we're just going to flip flop. That's the plan. So if you're tuning in and you're wishing you could see the tank, check Instagram, check other places. That's where you will find pictures of the tank or videos or whatever it is I'm happy to share. But the live streams are going to alternate between two different locations. Jack, what do you want? Go lie down, eat your treats, play with your stuff. This week, not a lot happened. Just kind of one thing, I stayed busy the whole time. But I didn't really come up with a topic this week. So I'm welcome to hearing what topic you may have that we can discuss. And otherwise, I'll just sit here and read your comments. I'm kidding. Hey, don't bark. Go lay down. Go on, go lay down. Go lay down. She's staring at me. So I still don't have lights in the main room yet. That is still a work in progress that I have to go find some that I like. Hey, Antonio, it's good to see you. I got some new products from him that aren't even on the pegboard yet. So I got the new Flex RFGs, the random flow generator. So if you're looking for those, they're in stock now. I need to add a lot of things to the website in the coming days that I haven't gotten a chance to put on there yet. But slowly but surely, more and more things get done. It'll be really nice to be completely done where I just focus on building some things and filling some orders and watching TV. That will be my life. But for now, it's still kind of a juggling act as I'm finishing up the last of the things that need to be done. So, hey, thank you. Someone said they appreciate my shirt or they love my shirt. I just finished a puzzle that I ordered online, probably an Instagram ad, maybe a Facebook ad, and it was Baby Yoda, and it's all laser cut out of wood. So I ordered this thing and I started building it last night, and then today I finished it. It was nice to kind of take my mind off of everything. My brain just never takes a break. And every single night I sleep with these real intense dreams where I'm trying to problem solve. And that's no way to stay healthy. I need to just relax and sleep. I like some dreamless sleep. That would be nice because I'm tired of trying to fix things or figure them out or complete the task. These are all the things happening in my dreams. It's driving me a little bit crazy. So yes, I did get the package you sent me. I hooked up the little device to my Versa pump. We'll see how it works. Antonio, since you're asking me specifically, your little gizmo that you made me, to get the air out of it, I just squeeze the fabric and it just like pumps the bubbles out. It works out really well. And now I can draw the water into the calcium reactor the way I wanted it to. Oh my goodness. Michael says, how about we take care of the tank while I'm away? I'm in the military and leave for 6 months at a time. Well, 6 months is a really long time to be away from your aquarium. Now, obviously, you've probably got someone at home that can help. Maybe a spouse or family member, and in those situations they can even give you updates, but when there's a crisis are they able to handle it, because it's not their hobby, it's your hobby that they're babysitting. So that makes it a little bit more challenging. But if you were able to create basically a logbook, that would be fantastic, where they can go to the skimmer section and they can go to the feeding section, they can go to the water change section, or emergency battery backup, or whatever it is you've got in place. If they had the ability to turn to that when they can't reach you because you're busy. I mean, even though you're away, that doesn't mean you're a phone call away. You're a phone call away when you're available to come to the phone. If you were in the middle of a mission, like the stuff I watch on TV, there's no way that you could just like stop and grab the phone and say, okay, check that sensor is completely wet. You can't do that. So I think I mentioned this last week. I had this idea for an app. I'm waiting for someone to invent it. They've had a week. What's taking them so long? But I thought it'd be really cool to have an app that lets you record, I don't know, 15 to 30 second recordings that you would then basically give that app with your recordings to your tank sitter. And the idea is that they could just flip through it, just like I talked about the binder where you're going through sections, and you go in the app and you can literally watch a video of you explaining how you do something. And with it being 15 to 30 seconds, it helps you hurry up and get to the point and not just stand there talking for 2 or 3 minutes about nothing, and then you finally get to it and they're like, oh my God, is he ever gonna get to the point? We just need to know the solution to the problem, and it could be something very, very simple, and you're just like 10 drops of this, or it's twist this knob a quarter turn, that kind of stuff. So if you could figure out a way to keep it short, and you could just re-record yourself 10 times till you get it right. But anyway, I think this would be a real practical app for people that need someone else to watch their tank. And when you're away, you can show how you add the top off water. You can show how you turn on the RODI system. You could create a whole bunch of these little demos pertaining to your tank specifically, rather than just being some generic one that doesn't really apply to yours and it doesn't look the same as yours and is confusing to them. So we'll see if someone actually decides to make this thing, but I think it's a great idea. And that's what I do. I think of ideas. So it would be nice if you could go ahead and have the Apex controller on your tank. Maybe the Hydros controller is another one that's on the market that's pretty popular right now, to where you could log in remotely and see some of what the tank's doing, as well as to receive notifications when something isn't right. But ideally, the person at home that's with the tank is doing the day-to-day, and they need to know the information. They need to be able to log into Fusion, or to realize the heaters are on too long, or the lights didn't, something, just whatever it is, because every single day something happens. And we want to avoid all the crisis we can avoid. Now, let's try another one. Neil says, talk about setting up the Apex controller. I got the A2 Apex setup. It's very basic right now. The A2 has been out since 2016. The A3 came out this year. So what is that, 6 years later? It's enhanced, but it still does what the A2 does with a few extra features. That's why I said enhanced. So having an Apex like the ones that are for sale here on my shelf behind me, they still work. They work completely like they should. That's the one that's on my tank. You don't have to get the A3. The A3, when BRS and different companies start pushing this big upgrade your Apex, get the upgrade your tank, they were talking about people that don't have a controller at all. That would be an upgrade for them. But for someone that has the Apex, it's not an upgrade at all. It is, there might be a couple little changes that makes your life a little bit nicer. Sort of like getting the latest iPhone. Some of you are super stubborn and say, I'm still rocking the iPhone 6. And I'm thinking, how? How are you still using that phone? And by the way, I just saw this on Mac Rumors yesterday. It is now considered legacy or antique. So if you've got a 6, it's time to upgrade. I have the 14 Pro and it has a lot of nice features, okay? But the A2 and the A3, the brain has not like vastly changed. The RAM hasn't vastly changed. I mean, there's just new ports, okay? So whatever controller you want to have, 2 or 3, just get it and hook it up to your tank. Now, you can make it as complicated as you want it to be, or you can have it as simple as you want it to be. I tend to think mine is a simple setup, but I've had other people look at my control panel like, wow, you do a lot. I'm like, no, I don't do anything. You should see Dwayne's. Dwayne's is insane. And his needs to be 5 columns wide. And that's not an option right now at this time. It's still 3 columns. You have to scroll way down. Or if you're on a phone, you got to scroll forever to get to whatever you're looking for. And but the bottom line is the controller can turn things on and off based on programming that you've either manually done, or you use the Apex tasks to select something and say, if the temperature is outside of this range, do this. Like, for example, if the tank gets too warm, then send you a notification. That would be the first one. Turn off the lights might be another one. Turn off the heaters could be another one. And that way you're not overheating the tank nonstop. And you're still getting notified so you can look into it. Some people have gotten a little fancy and they've hooked up like a red light or a red LED power strip behind their tank. And if anything isn't the way it's supposed to be, that, normal operations, if anything's awry, that strip just turns on. So if you just happen to walk in the room, it's glowing red. You're like, oh, something's not right. Let me check. Where's my phone? And so you can go ahead and double check things. But for me, I've been using the Aqua controller since it came out. My first one was in 2004. And I think that was the Aqua controller 2. And I used it to turn the lights on and off, turn the heaters on and off. I did use it to control my protein skimmer. I didn't use it to control my calcium reactor. That's always been standalone. And I mean, it let me know the temperature of the tank, the pH of the tank, the ORP, which is the oxygen reduction level of the aquarium. And so it just kind of gave me information. And it's just like when you test your tank with water test kits. You know, when you grab a test kit and you measure, now you have information, you can decide you need to make a change or if everything is fine. And so the same thing, the Apex controller allows you to do those things and just kind of verify how things are going. If you are at work, if you are at the store, if you are on vacation, you could log in briefly and just kind of take a look at things and see how things look. And if everything looks good, you know, you go on about your day, which is how it's supposed to be. And to be honest, when I'm out of town, I kind of put the reef behind me. And I'm sure many of you think, how could you do that? But when I'm 6 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours away, there's not much I can accomplish. And so that's why I have a tank sitter with a phone number. They can get a hold of me. I can get a hold of them. I can notify them if there's a notification on my phone. I can decide I don't need to bother them at all. You know, it's that kind of a situation. But having the information allows you to make decisions. But you can literally just set it up as a way to monitor your tank and not control anything, if that's your thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, I would say when you first set up an Apex controller, set it up to monitor and report. That's it. You can actually tell, you know, outlet 1, I want that to log. And then every time outlet 1 turns on or off, it puts it in the log. It turned on at this time, it turned off at this time. It turned on at this time, it turned. And you can look at the logs and see how many times your heater cycled on and off, for example. You could verify that your refugium light came on or off by looking at the log. So you can choose to have things logged, or you can actually say, oh, I never care about that. I don't want to know. And you just disable the little check mark on that box, and now it doesn't tell you anything. And that way, you know, you're just focused on things that matter. Because having a lot of data that is pointless and you don't care about isn't helpful at all. You wanted to tell you the things that matter. Now, on my system for the last couple of years, I think 3, I've been running the Trident, which allows me to measure alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium, and lets me just open my phone and glance at it and see where the numbers are. And while I'm not completely convinced these numbers are accurate, they still are close enough to their normal amount that I can say, okay, before I do my water test on Saturday. And if something looks really crazy wrong, not only will it look weird to my eye, but I get a notification saying alkalinity has dropped below 7.9. And I'm like, oh, and then I go figure out why. You know, is it the calcium reactor doesn't have liquid coming out of it? Has the CO2 run out on the calcium reactor itself? Has the reagent in the tester run out of liquid? So there's different things you can set up to kind of, you know, stay on top of things and catch them early before they go really badly. Because if I only test my tank once a week and something goes wrong on Monday and I don't test till Saturday, by Thursday or Friday, I could have a bunch of corals turning white. And then finally Saturday, I take out my test kits because I've been lazy. I'm like, well, that's weird. That thing turned white. I wonder why I did that. But I don't do anything. That'd be terrible. But if on Monday I get a notification, alkalinity has dipped below 7.9, I'm like, oh. And I can go look into the situation and make whatever tiny tweak I need to make to get it back up. Or I can literally physically buffer the tank with a little bit of soda ash to bring it up where it needs to be. And then keep an eye on the Apex and see if it stays at that number, if it keeps dropping. And that's what was happening. My calcium reactor is about this tall, and the media that's inside of it, which is this stuff right behind me here, that's the reborn media down there. And the media was down to about here in the reactor, and it kind of looked really dirty and mushy, and the cylinder was dirty. And I want to pull it out and clean it, but I couldn't. And I can't right now. There's too much stuff in the way. And so, you know, Dwayne said, why don't you just top it off and clean it some other day? And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. So while I was doing a big water change last week, I pulled off the lid, I dumped in more media, filled it to the top. I buffered the tank every day for 3 days in a row. And now I didn't need to buffer at all because now I had enough media that was dissolving, would maintain the right alkalinity in my tank. My tank would literally drop a full DKH in a 24-hour period. So if I was at 8.8, the next day I was at 7.8. So I buffered back up to 8.8. And I was doing this once a day, and it was kind of stupid. So I was like, why am I going to this physical hands-on approach when I've got a reactor that does the job? Let me just top it off, quit worrying about cleaning it, and just get it operational for now. And then later, when the anemone cube goes up, and the temporary tank gets out of my way, I can start getting into the sump again from the backside of the tank, and I can start cleaning things properly, pull out the Abyss pump and clean it, take out the calcium reactor and clean it top to bottom, really wipe down inside and out around the turf scrubber, just get in there. And it'll be nice to be able to do all that, and it's definitely on my hit list of things I need to knock out. But there's only so many hours in the day, and some days, some weeks just swing by, and I'm like, oh my God, it's already Friday. I can't believe it. So I can just tell you that having the Apex tell me these things allows me to keep my reef alive and healthy. And if you're trying to do very specific things, you can actually go to the official forum on the Neptune Systems website. They have a forum that's been around for a decade or longer, and it probably has like 90,000 posts of people asking the exact same question you've been asking, and you'll find the answers there. Or you can post a new thread and you can ask your question, and people will link you to their threads that gave you the answer. And that way you can read about it and apply the solution and move forward with your life. And if you're coming up with something brand new that's really neato, you can share your ideas. The same goes, there is a Neptune group on Facebook that's very helpful. I'm one of the moderators there, so if you need help there, you can do that. But I always think the official forum is the better place. I mean, you can find information in there, where on a Facebook group, what was posted today is hard to find 3 days from now. It just is. That's the nature of Facebook. Facebook's all about what's today. It doesn't care about what happened recently or a week ago or a year ago. So anyway, you've got different areas where you can get help, so you're not like completely on your own to where you're frustrated. But the tasks, there are like probably 50 tasks in the Infusion right now where you can select how to calibrate a pH probe, how to change the reagent in your Trident, how to set up automatic water changes, how to set up the dose, how to set up anything. They're all in there with little video clips, and they can tell you either on an iPad or an iPhone or probably Android. You can watch the different ways to do things and go through the steps and make the corrections or update the system to where it does all the neat things. So I have, like I said, I've been using it for a long time. I do sell their products because I'm semi-familiar with most of them, even though, to be honest, there are guys out there that know this stuff inside out, where for me, I deal with it the day I have to deal with it. I get it going and I'm done. And I don't look back. I don't log in 20 times a day. I don't keep tweaking things. I just want to plug it in, turn it on, do it. I got a thing a while back, a case to go around my iPhone when I go diving. And I probably got it in February or something like that, maybe March. I had to wait a while to receive it. I paid for it in December, but it took a few months to get it. And I couldn't get it to communicate with my phone at all. So I called the dive shop owner yesterday, who's my best friend, and said, I still can't use this thing. And she said, well, the warranty's only so good. I'm like, well, it's never seen water. I don't know how to use this thing. It doesn't talk to my phone. And she put me in contact with the owner of the company, who then gave me a suggestion, which was don't connect with Bluetooth, but literally open the app and let the app find it. And I was just like, okay. And I tried that, and it kind of sort of worked. Didn't work great. And then I emailed him back again. And he says, well, you need to get the new app. Don't use the original one. I was like, well, the documentation told me use this one, so I used that one. So I went into the App Store and looked for the correct one, got it, downloaded this new one, and it was easier to use than the original one. Whatever the original one was, it didn't like my phone at all. So anyway, I kind of got it going. It's okay. I still have questions, and the app did not fit properly on my iPhone 14 Pro, but that's new. And every time Apple changes anything, an app developer has to update the app to fit all the screens. So I let them know, like the zoom button doesn't even exist on the screen. It's off the screen. You can't see what it is. And so you'll need to move that up. But I also have an iPhone 11, and so I'm going to try the exact same test with the older phone and see if everything looks right. And maybe I'll just use that one when I go diving. So that'd be nice. But even while I was setting it up and using it, initially, there on my desk, just trying to figure out how to use the thing, I'm just thinking, this is so difficult. I just want to turn it on and use it. That's all I want. And I was getting frustrated, and I probably spent 2 hours on it, which was 2 hours too long. It should have been a 10-minute thing. And the same thing is with Apex. If I have to go figure something out, I'll spend the time, I'll figure it out, and then either I document what I did or I forget about it. And then somebody asks me a year from now or 3 years from now, how did you do such and such? And I don't remember anymore. I just don't. I pushed some buttons and it finally worked. So it's one of those things. That's why the groups are so helpful to where you can get assistance from others to walk you through the various steps or give you screenshots or what to look for or what to enable, what to disable, or what code to remove, because that completely is defeating the purpose of what you're doing. Now, I talked all about Apex the whole time. Hydros is a different version of a controller that has a lot of easy plug this in, turn this on, but you have to learn their terminology. So like power, I think it's called drive. Probes are called sensor or sense. So you have to know some of these things, because when you open the box, again, I felt like when I opened the box for the Hydros, I didn't know where to start. And so I was really hoping I could find a quick start guide on CoralView's website where it says, take this, put it aside. Take this little one, plug it in, and get power to it and find your Wi-Fi. That's what I would have loved. But instead, I grabbed the big one thinking that was the brain. Couldn't get it to work properly. Couldn't find a quick start guide. Contacted Carlos and said, please help me. And he says, just do this, just do this. I'm like, it's not doing that. Why am I the old grandpa that can't get this to work? So, he ended up doing a phone call with me, and he corrected this. He turned something off on his end, and it all started working. And we got everything connected, and then you grab all your gear and you make it a collective. And now you can just open this one collective to do your control of a tank. And you can have another collective for a different tank, and you can kind of grow the system. So again, I'm very, very basic on that one, because that's on my on Caitlin's Reef on that small tank, and it doesn't need much control. There's not a lot of demand, but it tracks temperature. It turns the heater on and off. And I did get a heater alert the other day that the heater was, I don't know, drawing power or running too long. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's new. And what had happened was when I cleaned the glass and I was kind of working in the back corner there where the air stone is, I literally pushed the, I guess it's the thermistor or the thermostat probe out of the water enough to where it was measuring air temperature, which was cooler than the tank. And so the heater was running, and the heater was running a little too long, and so Hydros warned me, and all I had to do was just push the probe back in the water. Everything was back in business. So it can be very small things, and a lot of times it's user error, and it's not that the thing is too hard or too complicated to figure out. It's just you aren't familiar with it yet. So as you get more and more familiar, you can move from monitoring to controlling. You can go from controlling to controlled dosing. I mean, you can literally make this a very complex thing. But then you have more spinning plates, more things you have to keep track of to make sure everything's operational. And the more something becomes automated, I feel like the more likely we will neglect it and make mistakes. So it's really important to at least keep an eye on everything. I used to just literally walk into my fish room and look down at the calcium reactor and look at the protein skimmer, look at the top off container, and walk out. That was it. And now I have to look at the Trident, check the levels. I have to open the turf scrubber and see how the algae is growing. I've got to see if the fans are blowing on the sump. I mean, there's lots more things to check, but the automation enables them and disables them and lets me know when there's a problem. And that's what I like about them so much. Let's see. Michael says, also cameras in the Apex. Now, the Apex doesn't literally talk to some kind of camera. There's maybe one or two on the market. You can make them somehow interact, and that way the camera's part of your dashboard. But, I mean, Wise is so cheap and so readily available. I mean, Amazon will have it on your doorstep tomorrow. You can just set up 2 or 3 of those in your house anywhere you want. You can put them all around the tank, one over the sump, one over on the tank itself. You can make the thing pivot left and right. You can zoom in and out. You can really look at things, all with an app. So exit Fusion, open Wise, and go look at your tank if you need to, or check on the filter socks and see if they're completely gushing over because they're packed and dirty. And just work your way through the system, and that way you have those cameras for visibility. Also, if you have someone helping you with a tank and you're not home, and they can call you with FaceTime or Messenger video or something like that, they can also show you things, literally putting their phone exactly where the weird noise is, or where the water's squirting out, or whatever it is that's happening. They can show you, and it'll help you analyze when you're not home what's going on. And then you can talk them through whatever it is you need them to do or not do for now until you can get home. I'm looking at some questions here. See? Antonio says it's an interesting app. I'd use it. I'd use it too. I think it might be kind of hard to transfer it, but I mean, if you create an app and you have these video clips, I assume these video clips have to save to a cloud or somewhere, right? Which takes up space, costs money to maintain. If somehow it saved the information into the app and you could then give that app to someone else, I mean, you'd have to give them that app with that data. It's kind of a big file. I don't know. But just anything that makes it simple, I think would be reasonable to where you could literally create the videos you think will help them and not put a bunch of videos they don't care about at all. Like how to feed fish. That would be a fantastic one. You could show how much food you use. You could have it in your hand, or you could put it on a little container with a lid that says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And you could just say, grab today's. That's all the food you're going to use. That's what you say in the video. And you do this and you show where you pour it in the tank. And you might always pour to this end, and you don't want them dumping it over here because it goes in the overflow box, right? Well, they don't know better, and you could tell them do it over here, but when you're away, you don't know what they're doing. And you still don't know what they're doing unless you're watching them through the Wise camera. But if you have these little video clips that show how to do things, it can help alleviate issues and also avoid mistakes. Because sometimes, I mean, how many of you have gone to a doctor's office, you sit on the butcher paper, you listen to the doctor, you say okay, and you leave and you're like, what did they just tell me to do? What did they say? What did they say I need to buy? How many times am I supposed to take that? What is... And you can't remember anything. I mean, there have been times where I've gone to see my doctor and I just said, can I just put my phone and record next to me while we're talking so I can play this back because I'm going to forget it all anyway. And she was like, yep. I was like, okay, good. So same principle. You have a tank sitter that's with you. If you can't make sure they're memorizing it, you could film something. You could even send video clips straight to their phone. You could just airdrop to them and fill up their hard drive with all kinds of video data. Let's see. Todd says, I'm 4 years in on my reef and it's growing to the point where I don't know if I should do a reset or go bigger. So how about reset compared to a new larger system? Well, I can tell you this. New and larger cost more money. Reset costs less money because you keep all the gear you have and you're basically just going through and removing the things that bother you. My own 400-gallon tank has had 2 resets and it's coming up on its 9th anniversary. So about every 4 years, I go in and we pull out a lot of dead skeleton, all the undergrowth. We save all the good stuff that's pretty in a separate vessel temporarily while we're cleaning the tank. And we get in there and we pull everything out that needs to be cleaned. I might tackle the sand bed and really siphon it deep, do a deep cleaning. And then I reset and I plant all my corals back in the tank. And it's a big ordeal, especially my size tank. Now, I don't know what size your reef is, but I mean, there's people that say, oh, my tank is 6 gallons. I'm thinking you could do this in an hour. But then there's others that have a 40 or they have a 120 or they have a 280. And so it all comes down to scale. The bigger the tank, the more this ordeal will take. And you need to be able to allocate as much time as possible to take care of it, or you have to do it in sections where you say, I'm going to do this much on Friday night, I'm going to do this much on Saturday, I'm going to do this much on Sunday, but by Monday I'm done. And yeah, but I like resetting. It saves money, and because you'll keep the same lights and you have the same pumps, but odds are this stuff has been getting dirtier and dirtier, and it just needs to be brought back to back to specs. Getting it nice and clean and operational at 100% again is so much better than everything running dirty. And this goes for me too. I actually have to go through my own gear and say, Mark, pull out these Vortec pumps and go clean them. And it's like, oh, but I gotta go to Home Depot and buy some acid, or I have to order some citric acid from Amazon or whatever. It's always another thing I need to do. So at some point you just have to bite the bullet and just do it. But the reset would be nice, and you don't have to make big changes in your life. But if you've outgrown the tank, or your livestock has outgrown the tank and you need a bigger system, then going to a larger one, you could then change a lot of what you've put up with for what you think will be far better this time, because you've learned a lot with your tank over the last 4 years, and you have the opportunity to implement some really cool ideas that you couldn't do previously for whatever reason. Michael says he's been training the wifey. Jason, why do you work so much? And he says he upgraded his phone from a 6 to an 11. My 11 is my old dive phone now at this point. My 14 is my new one. Neil says, I can't get my salinity probe to calibrate. I've tried manually and auto calculations. I use Neptune's calibration solutions and tried calibrating to my tank water. It still fails calibrating. I wouldn't sweat it right now. I feel like you just set this up recently, if I remember the post correctly, and maybe you bought it used. The probe could be bad. The end of the connector could be bad. It could be not screwed all the way in properly because of the BNC connection, if I remember correctly. It could just be that you need to just wait. Sometimes things take care of themselves after you just give it some time. I mean, it's nice to like plug everything in on day one and get it to operate, but it's just like setting up a brand new tank and then plug in the skimmer. It does nothing. There's no point doing it. I always say let the tank cycle, do all of that. Then finally you can fire up the skimmer when you're ready. And with the salinity probe, that one, even if you set it up properly, may not cooperate for a week or two. It's just one of those things. And it's kind of hit or miss. The mine, I believe, is working okay. Let me take a look and see where I'm at on mine. Let me see what Wi-Fi I'm on. Oh, good. I'm on the studio Wi-Fi. Perfect. So my tank is at 8.7 alkalinity, and it's showing my salinity is at 34.7. So mine is kind of staying where it needs to be. Now, something that VCA came out with, and I have a whole bunch of, is the Salinity Probe Stability Kit. And you can hook this up on your salinity probe, and it actually pushes water across it. You can use a little tiny C-shaped pump or something. I have a manifold, so I just ran a 1/4-inch line to this, and it just squirts water over or through this little thing that is sitting on the base of the sensor of the salinity probe, and that way it's always clean water, no air bubbles, and it helps stabilize your salinity. But you're trying to calibrate, you're trying to hit a certain magic number. That hasn't always been my goal. Mine has been more to just get a consistent number all the time. And for example, if my tank is 35 ppt, but my fusion was telling me it's 36.1, as long as it's around 36 all the time, I wouldn't care. But I can tell you this, salinity probe is one of those finicky probes that will drive you a little bit batty if you try to live and breathe off of that thing, because you could be doing absolutely nothing and suddenly your salinity just drops and then it rises. And you're like, what happened? What was the hiccup? Because your tank literally didn't change salinity for a brief period of 30 minutes. So what happened? And I don't really have the answer to that. I don't know. I don't keep track of it because it's never been a very important probe to me. But it is nice to know, generally speaking, where your numbers are supposed to be. And you do have the graphs you can look at. So I think eventually Neptune will help you get that figured out one way or another. So don't give up. It's just a little bit tricky. Yeah. Rather Be Traveling says, you can get information overload. pH is off by 0.05. What's going on? Or the magnesium's up or it's down by 20 points. So yeah, the numbers, the physical number isn't always that critical. And a lot of times when people do a screenshot and they show like this graph going crazy, it looks like it's having a heart attack. I never can see the bottom, which is where it matters. That bottom area is where it shows the low, the high, and the average. That's the number I want to know. And like, I remember this one guy, he was really upset about something and his graph looked completely erratic. And I looked at it and I was just like, well, I can't see the numbers at the bottom, but I believe your pH is changing by 0.1 and that is nothing. And he was just really upset about it. I'm like, stop looking at the graph and look at the real number. Your variance is so minor, it's completely normal, and that's what it's supposed to do day in and day out. So don't sweat it. And I don't know. I mean, I walked away from the thread. I don't know if he was happy or not. Paul says, and thank you for the super chat, what would you recommend for starting into an Apex? Well, the first thing you're going to need is going to be the brain, which is, the hub, and then it's going to need an energy bar. And the energy bar itself is included. It's a kit. And there are a couple kinds. This one here is the Apex EL. And then this other one is the full Apex. So I'll grab them both since we're talking about them. Put this one down here. So inside here, you've got your brain right there. It's got 2 probes and it's got the energy bar. And the energy bar has 8 outlets in there. And then it has 3 1-link outlets on the side, and it has 4 USB ports on it, which are not for USB. You can't put a thumb drive in them. Can't do anything else. You can't charge anything. It's literally being used for something called an Aquabus cable. I was trying to see if there was some quick information on here, but I don't remember it all by heart. But you've got 8 outlets, 3 outlets, and 2 outlets. That's what's totally 832. And with those different outlets, you can plug in specific things, but you don't have to plug everything into it. So this can be the things you want to control, but you could also have other things that don't need to be controlled, where the pump runs all the time, no matter what. For example, let's say you had a manifold pump, and it's just going to run 24 hours a day because it feeds 5 reactors. That doesn't have to go into the apex. That can plug into the wall. Your lights that are on the ceiling or above the tank, you can usually plug those in the wall. But if you want to use the apex to turn the lights on and off, depending on what kind of fixture it is, you may want to. But for example, let's say you bought some lights that had a timer built into them, or maybe there's an app that tells them, what time it is and what time to come on, what time to turn off. If that's the case, it plugs straight into the wall. It doesn't plug into a controller. And you use the app to do everything you got to do. If, like my Sky fixtures that I use over my tank, they're actually plugged into the apex, but they don't need to be, because they were all programmed through an app. And so I can just literally plug them into the outlets up high above my aquarium instead and free up the space. But I literally have the power supplies, the lights, and the energy bar on the light rack. And so I plug everything into that. When I move the rack, everything moves as one unit. And that was better than having the lights have a cord that goes to the outlet on the wall, and I move the rack and I have to worry about how the cords dangle or if they get caught or snagged on the rack. It was simpler to keep everything together, but they don't need to be in that. So getting just the base unit would be smart. And then this one here is not the EL. This is the full system. And this one comes with 4 probes. It comes with the pH, the ORP, the temperature probe, and the salinity probe. And then you've got the energy bar, the 832, and you've got the brain as well. This one specifically can be plugged in. It can be used with Wi-Fi, but I always recommend people plug in Ethernet cables to run a hardwire from your router straight into this, so you're not relying on Wi-Fi. Now, I read something interesting in the Hydros group. I'm going to move this out of my way here. In the Hydros group, one guy was saying how he was having a lot of Wi-Fi problems, and it was affecting his tank mainly. It wasn't affecting like his Apple TV or whatever device he had, because the more gizmos you have in your house that are smart, the more your router has to communicate with everything. And if you've ever logged into the admin panel of your router, you'd be shocked to see there's like 128 devices talking to it. Every bulb in your ceiling is talking to it, and your Bose speakers and your outside porch this and your Christmas lights, and you have so many devices that all plug in because that is the future. And so what he ended up doing, he got rid of his mesh network, which was surprising because I thought mesh is always a solution. And he created a couple of 2.4 gigahertz bands. So he had one specifically for the tank. He had one that he used to like talk to all of his smart light bulbs and stuff. And he says once he did that, there was way less traffic because there was traffic on the 5G band, there was traffic on the 2.4G band, and then there was just the Hydros traffic on its own 2.4 gigahertz band. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Now, I don't know if that's a bunch of BS, but it seemed logical to me because in the end, the internet is all about communicating and sending signals and packets that have to transfer, and everything's going through switches till it can get to the final destination. And so if you can divide it up and have 5 things on this one, and you have 10 on this one, and you have 4 on this one, it's going to work a lot better than when you have 15 on one. So if you're fighting the Wi-Fi gods and you're having a lot of issues, maybe start delving into that and see if you could do something to start eliminating things that are using your network that don't need to be. And I mean, think about it. This whole room is all Wi-Fi. And I've got a lot of devices. The whole alarm system's tied to it. The television's tied to it. The internet and all that. But I ran a hard line to get us a nice signal, and I can hardwire straight into my television, not rely on Wi-Fi at all. It's convenient, and so I'm able to do it. But I don't need to have it that way. And then if you have a bunch of Wise cameras, they're all going to use your network as well. And then, I have a sprinkler timer. It uses my network. I mean, I'm starting to think in my head, there are so many things that use my network. My front door lock uses my network. Of course, my aquarium has all kinds of things that use it. And then there's certain things that just use Bluetooth still, but a lot of them are on Wi-Fi. And if you just open up your phone, you'll see this list of devices pop up, and you might recognize a Comore pump on there. Or in my case, I've seen the Kraken case for my dive computer. I mean, just so many gizmos, and all these things are all pulling a little bit of signal. So that would be an area that might be worth taking a look at. Kevin says, I asked last week if you would recommend running RODI to the return, and I understand the reasons why not to. But to solve one issue, I read auto flush flow restrictor could fix TDS creep. Yes, if you were to create some kind of a system that runs the unit for about a minute or two before it sends water to the DI stage, and if you can automate that, which I would love. I wish I had that kind of automation, and I probably spent $400 for all the components I would need to do it, but I just never did it because of the hassle factor and the weirdness of what I had to accumulate. Because I had to take one of my Apex energy bars and I had to put it near the RO system to plug in my booster pump. That was the first thing. And then I had to plug in solenoids, and they had to plug into that as well. So that way the Apex could say, open solenoid 1. That lets water come out of the RO system. And then after 2 minutes, it would have to close that solenoid and then open the solenoid after the DI to let the water go there. But then I also had to run an Aquabus cable from the energy bar, from the utility room, through the ceiling all the way to the fish room to connect with the Apex network, because you always have to have one Aquabus cable. And the Aquabus cable, like I said, is a USB cable, and you can have a really long one, like I think up to 150 feet away, but it has to be a very specific non-boosted USB cable, because I'm probably saying this wrong, but it doesn't carry power. It probably does, but it doesn't carry the right power. And a boosted cable doesn't work with the Apex system. It has to just be a bare bones looking USB wire. Or you just get the official Aquabus cable from Neptune, and you have to have the long one. They have like a 75 footer. They've got like a 15-foot extension cord one you can use to extend. Like if you have a 6-footer, you can add 15 and get you up to 21 or 22. And so you've got the different ways to build that, but I still have to run the wire through my ceiling. And I was like, I just don't feel like doing all this. So I have all these components that I've purchased, and gradually they get used up in other projects anyway, so it wasn't wasted money. But for me, I just opened the line to let the water out. Now, if you were going to do some kind of an auto flush system, I know BRS had some kind of a little gizmo that was white, and it had some kind of primitive base programming that you could not change anything on. Like you plug it in and it just does its thing when it wants to do it, and you can't tell it not to do it, you can't tell it to do it more frequently, and it was just a way to flush the membrane for whatever the duration was that's built into that little plug. I didn't find that to be a great system since it was so limited in what it could accomplish, or the lack of that it couldn't do enough. I would much rather have it come on literally when I'm about to make water and do that flush for the 2 minutes and then close it. And it didn't do that. Now, I'm trying to think, if you're literally flushing the membrane and not opening up the RO line, if you're flushing the membrane, it doesn't have to be minutes. It has to be 15 seconds, because the water is going through the membrane at 80 PSI or 60 PSI, and it's going to push out a lot of water in 15 seconds. The membrane will be flushed. It's just like rinsing your hands. How long do you rinse your hands? You rinse your hands for 10 minutes? Nobody does that, right? You flip on the lever, you get a little bit wet, and you turn it off, and you go dry off your hands. That's rinsing. It's the same thing with the membrane. You rinse it for 15 seconds, the water flushes through, goes straight down the waistline, and that's it. And then you close the valve, and then you start making RO or RODI water at that point. I have never done that system. I've always just opened the RO line and let that initial amount of water sitting around the membrane come out over a 90-second period, and I can watch the TDS meter go really, really high and then come straight back down, all in 60 seconds. And after about 90 seconds, it's as low as it'll get. I can close the RO line and open the DI and send it in to refill my top-off reservoir, which is the water that my tank will then use to top off the tank throughout the day, every day, for like the next 7 to 11 days. So if you can find, and Reef Dudes did a video talking about an automatic water system, and he was doing it with a bunch of solenoids. Again, he had the area to put all these plugs and run the cables where he needed to go. And you could check out that video and see if you want to go that route. So there are ways to do it. Let's see. Oh, that's a good suggestion, Antonio. Yeah, I think cloud-based. It probably costs some money because the storage. And that's why I feel like you have, back to my little app idea. If you can limit the duration of all the videos, you'll limit how much is being stored. Because if you just have somebody's rambling for 8 minutes about how to feed their fish, that's a massive amount of data. And it's just sitting there for no reason until someday you might have a tank sitter. We need to cut it down to the absolute essential. It's sort of like when you add a reel to Instagram and it says pick the music, and you have all these songs and you find the song you think is awesome and it says, okay, you get these 9 seconds. And it almost have to be the same thing as like, okay, you've talked for 2 minutes, now pick the 15 seconds that matter out of that. I mean, it would be kind of a beating, but you could just re-record until you get it down to the essentials. And you could become an excellent videographer after you've done 5 or 10 of these little tutorials for your tank sitter. Rather Be Traveling says, I have to do a tank swap next week. My tank seam is failing and it's only 2 months old. Do you have any advice for doing that? I read you need to throw the sand out. No, your sand is good for up to 6 months. After 6 months, if the tank's been running more than 6 months, I always say wash the sand out to get rid of all the trapped detritus and all the sediment and all the stuff that's in there. And that we have nice clean sand for the new setup or the transfer. But if it's under 6 months old, you can basically scoop it and move it right into the other tank and just go on with your life. Lincoln Town says, do you have any idea what trace elements are the most common to be depleted? Oh, iodine would be one. I really should have a list of these in my head, but this was, I haven't been thinking about trace elements for the last 3 weeks. Let me open up a file where I can see them. Give me a second here. And I need to either move everything getting closer, just a second. Because I have a spreadsheet of all my trace elements. That's why I said, let me look at that. That'll be easier. Move this chat box for a second. Actually, I can let you guys see this if you want. Okay, let's do this. Where is our thing? There's a lot on the screen. There's not enough space. So here are my trace elements. Let me scoot this over to the middle of the screen. And this was used in my ICP presentation that I did in MACNA. And you can see there's a lot of testing that happened in the last couple of months. And on the left column, you can see all the different elements, whether they're major or minor trace elements. Molybdenum, I can never seem to get it to rise, so I'd say that one burns up pretty quickly. Vanadium has been another one that's been very hard for me to bring up. As you can see, a lot of times it says ND, which means not detected. Or my number is 0.002, which is almost nothing at all. I mean, that's what 2 parts per billion is, by the way. So 0.002 is actually the sweet spot. I finally hit it. But I had to dose a lot of it to bring it up. And then all the stuff at the bottom, uranium, well, I'm sorry, silver, gold, cerium, lanthanum, antimony, tin, titanium, and tungsten. They don't even show up on the Reef Labs test. They don't even do that one. I mean, it's not even part of the list. But like I said, iodine's one. Iron would be another one to keep an eye on because we have macroalgae we're trying to grow. And you can see iron is supposed to be, according to ICP analysis, they recommend 20 parts per billion. And Reef Labs recommends 0.005 mech per liter, or milligram per liter, I'm sorry. And my number was 0.005, 0.003. Actually, let me just highlight this line, be easier. Then it went lower and lower and finally it's not detected, and I need to dose it. So it says need iron, need manganese. So if you're, yeah, let me come back to you first. I lost my little window again. It's hiding. Sorry, I had to move everything around because I couldn't see it. Let me open up my Reef Labs for you guys. Bookmarks. So I've talked about ICP quite a bit in the last few months because I got immersed into it. I really need that camera thing to stay on my screen where I can show you what I'm changing. It keeps hiding behind this thing because I've got it full screen. Actually, if I could shrink this maybe, I think it'll still work for you guys. Maybe. So I think this will work now. We'll go here and we'll click this. So this is Reef Labs. And you can see in this upper section here, this is my latest test, which was actually a month ago. And you can see the things that it felt were important. It looked at lithium and manganese, silicon, vanadium, and zinc. And it was saying that my zinc was too high, my vanadium was way too low, silicon was low, manganese is non-detected, lithium non-detected. But it also shows possible solutions. Like on the far right, it says correction, do a water change, and that'll fix your lithium. Interesting, right? Manganese and silicon and vanadium were trace elements you have to add. And then to remove zinc, it suggested a water change running carbon or running GFO to get the zinc lower in the system. Then under that, it will show some comparisons of previous tests, and it will show the changes that have happened. So you can kind of have like a quick bird's eye view before you get down to the grid. And then it talks about ratios, and I really like this one right here where it shows the magnesium to calcium ratio, and it shows the optimal range, and it shows what your range is. So you can kind of figure out what's wrong. So like, for example, your magnesium is much too high, this range will be completely out of whack. But if you get them in the sweet spot again, then you'll be in the optimal range. And then it did say the solution is water changes, but the real solution is going to be correcting your dosing. Then there's a chloride to sodium ratio, and I'm right where I belong, and a chloride to sulfate ratio, and I am right there too, so that one's perfect. Then it does include your salinity at this place, which I like, and it also computes phosphate levels, which is really nice because we all have different ways of testing. You guys know I like to use ELOS, which is going to be a color titration kit. Others use the HANA checker where you have a digital readout. And so here I can actually see, a quick number to kind of verify, is that close to what I thought I saw with my own test kit? And then here in this next section, it shows the essential macro elements, which would be the big things like calcium and potassium and chlorine and magnesium, sodium, sulfur, and strontium. Strontium is a really important one, by the way, and it was one of those ones that, again, I didn't really give it a lot of thought. But being at 8 milligrams per liter is that great number. And they've made it where you can click on stuff now and make things happen. So it'll say why strontium is good. It says essential for coral growth, health, and coloration. And it shows how it changed from the last test. How cool is that, right? Now, strontium, I always thought that if you had a problem with calcium in your system, that your SPS corals would break more easily. Turns out the strontium is why they snap easily. So if your tank is deficient in strontium, you could then end up with corals that are more brittle than they need to be. So by increasing the strontium level in your aquarium back to the original level, which is 8, you will then actually have corals that are a little tougher, that when you bump them, they don't just break in half. Then you've got your beneficial minor and trace elements, which are going to be things like barium and cobalt and chromium and iron and iodine, nickel and molybdenum and selenium and silicon and vanadium and zinc. And you can see the colors. Green is good, yellow is low, red is high, blue has gone down a little bit. And again, you've got your comparisons, which is pretty nice. And then finally, you've got your contaminants and toxins. And it shows here if the levels are problematic or not. And last time I checked it, everything was green. So this test might not be the one I think it is. Yeah, this is 8.1. This is an old test. Let me go to 9.6. Here we go. Now you go look at me. See, everything's green. I got it right. So you have the ability to see if you have problems with too much aluminum in the system, too much arsenic, or other things. Normally, aluminum and arsenic are the ones that are the big problem in our tanks that seem to come from probably the ceramic media that people use that's supposed to be used for denitrification, or a type of bacterial bed that can sleep in your sump. So a lot of times this one creeps up and gets too high. Also, there are products that removes nitrate from the water that are aluminum based, and that will raise aluminum in the tank, which is bad for leather corals. So you want to be aware of that. So anyway, this is what I've been using for my ICP testing, and so these are the various trace elements that I like to keep an eye on, and then I've been dosing things that I like. There's certain things I do dose, and there's certain things I don't. I definitely dose iodine. I don't dose iron, and I need to, because my refugium and my algae turf scrubber both have like weak growth right now. I need to order some iron. And I've been dosing vanadium, which finally I got it to the right level, but I haven't used it in a couple of weeks, so I'm sure it's gone down again. And I have put in tons of manganese, and yet it always shows none present. Molybdenum, I had to put it in once. See, it says elevated. I dosed it for like 1 week, and the number went up and never came down. It's been elevated for the last 4 weeks in a row. So that's that. All right, let's get back to your chat. Put you back on the screen where I can see. And I'll close that thing. Let's see, it said the stream cut out for a second. Hopefully we're okay. I was just saying, it moved me. I was down to somebody named Luke. There he is. I finally get to participate in a live stream. Always missed out. By the way, how's your potassium dosing going? I haven't needed to dose potassium in a long time. My numbers have been up around 435 pretty much nonstop for a few months. So that's been good, but I still have some left in case I do need to dose some again. Lefty says, first time attending Reefapalooza, what should I expect to see? You'll see a lot of coral vendors, and you'll have the opportunity to shop and find all kinds of pretty things to buy. That is pretty much what Reefapalooza has always been. It started off as a frag swap in a guy's backyard a long time ago. I don't know, 20 years ago? A long time ago. And the guy that came up with it was a guy named Mark Trimble. And then it grew into a bigger show and ended up going to a place, I think it's the fairgrounds in Los Angeles. And there's this huge building, and you could just walk through and do all your shopping. And what it was such a public area because it wasn't just like hobbyists going to this thing. It was like people were at the fairgrounds anyway. Like, hey, what's happening in that building? Let's go check it out. I'm like, oh, it's $5 to get in? Yeah, let's go in there and see. Oh, so this is about fish? What is this place? You know, and they'd learn a little bit about corals and fish. But most people are going through there looking for good deals, and they move on. And then Reefapalooza then moved over to Florida as well. And it became a bigger show with a lot of vendors. Plus, you know, so you got the coral sales, but you started seeing dry goods. And I remember I went with Dave from Next Reef. And we went to, we worked in his booth together, and he was showing off his products. He was making reactors and sumps and things. And I was his guest, and it was pretty cool. And then there was Reefapalooza in New York, and now there's a Reefapalooza Dallas that's happening next weekend. So you get to go to these ones, and they almost always are all about shopping. So that's what you can come to expect. I would definitely bring a cooler to keep your livestock the right temperature, because as you buy things, you're going to want to keep them, you know, the same stable. They should be stable the whole time. And you can buy things and come back for them later if you feel the need. Like, you don't want to carry the weight for a long time, like if you're going to be there all day. And if you just tell them, I want to pay for this now, they'll just put it in the back, or they'll put your name on it, and they'll put it in the sump. And then at the end, you can just go around to all the different vendors and pick up your goodies like I do. And sometimes I forget. And I'm like, who did I buy from? And I have to go hunt down my goodies. But that's what you can expect. Michael says, do you think 7 tanks is too many in a 180-gallon reef? Depends. Are they this big or are they this big? I remember going to a guy's house. He had a huge aquarium. I mean, it was just massive. 500 gallons, something big. And it was really tall, like 4 feet tall, just this huge giant tank with the rocks were kind of stacked almost like pillars. And it had a lot of tanks in there. And I thought, who cares? It's a 500-gallon tank. And people said, he has 36 tanks. And I was like, okay. And then I started thinking, 36 tanks, no matter how big the tank is, that's 36 mouths. That's a lot of fish. I mean, he was a huge tang lover. The guy just could not stop buying them. And it took me a minute to realize, yeah, that is too many. And later on, the same guy ended up opening up a fish store with another guy. And they set up a big tank in the back. And they put a lot of that livestock into there. They put others in a different tank. And they divided it up. But yeah, he had a big passion for tangs. 7 may be too many for your 180 gallon. I had 6 on my 280 gallon tank and it felt okay. My 400 gallon right now has 3 tanks currently, and I'd like to get 1 more. So it just depends. Like I said, if they're tiny, yeah. I was talking to a friend yesterday and he's just ordered a brand new tank. It's going to be like a 120 gallon tank. And his fiance said, well, I want, Dory. I want the hippo tank. And he said, no Dory. And I said, dude, you have to totally get her a Dory. If she wants this, you got to do it. It's your fiance. This is how marriage works. And he was like, no. I said, better yet, get 50 hippo tangs. And he was like, what? And I was like, 51-inch tangs would look amazing. They would be shoaling and schooling throughout that tank. It would just look like confetti. Blue confetti. It'd be so awesome. And he says, in a year from now, I'll be trying to find them homes. Like, no, in a year from now, you'll be getting 49 more tanks. So, but no, you can put a lot of little tangs in a tank initially, but you have to plan for their future. I mean, tangs live a super long time, 15, 25, 35 years. So it is smarter to buy tangs that you are going to commit to for the long haul and have the tank that is big enough to handle that load and realize these fish will grow larger. And eventually you'll have to move them into a bigger system. So you don't want to overtax the system. If your water quality is keeping up with your fish load, then great. I mean, things are okay. But long term, that probably won't work out because it'll just become too much of a bioload. And you'll be fighting, to maintain good water quality parameters because of the amount of fish in there. And, this goes for lots of things. It goes for too many dogs in a household, same principle. You have to figure out what is the good balance that makes it work. You've seen my little 27-gallon tank, and it's got 3 fish in there right now. And I'm loving it, but I kind of want to put more, but I know more fish means more bioload. And I'm only changing the water once a week on that tank. And that's the only filtration that tank gets is a water change. So for me to put more fish in there is a mistake. So I have not done it. So I resisted the urge to go find a clownfish or something like that. Michael says, I haven't gotten my first ICP results back. I found I'm deficient in 6 or 7 trace minerals like cobalt, iodine, nickel, etc. Do you dose each of these? Do you do them all at once, one at a time? So when I first started dosing my trace elements, I had my bottles. I bought this one and that one and the other one, and I was literally putting them in like a drop at a time. Now, certain ones you literally counted a drop, or others I'd fill a syringe to so many milliliters, and I would hold the syringe over the tank, and I would drip it in an area of high flow. And that was me being very tedious and very, very hands-on, rather than just trusting some dosing pump to do the job. You can combine some trace elements together. Some don't mix. But you could combine some, and I'd have to find out which ones they are. I mean, I'd have to find out myself to tell you what you can never put together in the same bottle. But ideally, if you had like a week's worth of liquid you're going to pump into your tank, you could add in the right amount of trace elements into that week's worth, hook it up to a dosing pump, and let it trickle in the entire body of water over 7 days. So you'd have 7 different dosings, or you might even do dosing several times throughout the day from that jug each day. So you see that you could do that. One of the things that Chris at ACI was really recommending is that you dose these trace elements. You're dosing the things that benefit your tank while the corals are actively utilizing the elements, rather than dosing it in the nighttime when they're all in rest mode. So, I mean, I find that to be interesting, and I can't really argue with that logic. it's just like dosing alkalinity when the tank is using alkalinity. It makes more sense than dosing it when the corals are not taking it up. But in my situation, I can't control it. My calcium reactor runs 24 hours a day. It's just putting in a little bit all the time. So that is what it is. But if I was relying on kalkwasser and not a calcium reactor, then Chris is recommending dosing all the kalkwasser during the night, which brings the pH up. But he's not doing kalkwasser to maintain alkalinity. It's not even his number. He cares about pH now instead of alkalinity. Kevin says I skipped his question. So let me see if I can go find it, because there's a giant K next to it. No, I answered that. Keep in mind, I'm always way behind the chat. Trevor says, my tank is looking and doing really well, but I'm fighting phosphates for almost a year, and I'm thinking about using Tropic Marin carbon dosing. What are your latest thoughts? The question would be, what is the level of your phosphates? How bad is it? Are they crazy high? Like, if you're using a test kit, is the solution deep, deep blue? Or is it, I mean, what are your numbers? And have you verified that these numbers are accurately true? Because, like, for example, years ago, I was testing nitrate and my numbers were 7. I felt really good about it. Turns out the test kit had been lying to me for a whole year. My tank was 80. And all that time, I was like, I don't have to worry about nitrate. My nitrate's solid. This is fantastic. Bad kit. So the question is, how high are they? How bad is the algae in your tank? Is your tank's doing really well and looking really good? So it kind of makes me think they're not as bad as you're fearing, and they may not be something you have to actually change if everything's doing well. But if it's too much to where you have to bring it down, there are methods. Like you said, carbon dosing is one. I use phosphate RX to bring phosphates down to a manageable level. I haven't used anything in my tank for probably the last 2 months, I guess. No, a little bit less, but yeah, about 2 months, because my nitrates have gotten up so high that I don't want the phosphates to be crazy low. So I'm just kind of letting nitrate and phosphate happen as I'm trying to slowly bring the nitrate back down. Hi, Thomas. Mike says, did I get the email about an order you'd like to place? If you were asking about a peacemaker, I did not get to reply to you yet. I forget where I was. I think I was on the road and I couldn't answer, and it's still marked unread, so I won't miss it. But yeah, I can build whatever you need, basically. Grow says, what circulation pumps do you think are the best? Well, I love the Vortec pumps. I mean, I think they're awesome. But there's lots of different ones on the market. It really comes down to what you want to look at in your display tank. The Gyres is another one that came out to basically compete with the Vortec. Tunzi's been around for a long time before Vortex came out. And you just had these big things in your tank. Apex came out with the wave pumps that hold on with a magnet through the glass, and you've got this thing that you can point wherever you want in your tank. But they're all eyesores. I mean, the ultimate flow would be invisible pumps. That would make me super happy. And then, there's high-end pumps that cost a fortune that you could possibly get that could just change your pocketbook and change your way of thinking. But really, what I like is something that will last long-term and be reliable and work with a battery backup. So those are the kind of the things I'm looking for. Cisco says, do you know anyone who's tried dosing or dipping Euphilia with Cipro? I think Jason Langer did. You could ask him. Lincoln says, do you sell the products needed to make a DIY dosing container out of a 5-gallon bucket? Well, I sell dosers. I have the Camor pumps, and you have the 5-gallon bucket. So then it really comes down to what else do you need in that container. Now I sell the DIY additives like alkaline, calcium, magnesium you can mix up. So, I mean, I have some of those things, but I don't know what else you would need. Luke says, are you still dosing potassium? What are the pros and cons on dosing it? The pro is that your corals get more colorful. The con would be not having enough. And basically you want to have at least 400 ppm in your system. That would be your bottom number, and anything above it is good. Now, I would not recommend going to some crazy high numbers. I actually did a video interview with Justin Credible, and he talked about having potassium at like 600, 800, and crazy high numbers. But he is a coral farmer that likes to test the limits of things, and he likes to cook things up in a lab, basically. Myself, I've found that my tank does really, really well at 400, but historically it was always around 360, 340. And then last year I had a really bad incident where my tank was below 200 and everything started to die. And so that bringing that back up made a big solution, and it fixed the tank and got it back on track. So I definitely recommend using it. But I would not use it if your number's already at 400. I would just say you're there and just start dosing it when your tank gets low. Rather Be Traveling says, will you be at Reefapalooza next weekend in Frisco? No, I'll be at Aquashella in Chicago, believe it or not. They're both on the same weekend, and I'm speaking in Chicago, so I will not be at Reefapalooza. Symphonies of the Reef says, my nitrates are at 80 ppm on my API test kit. Is that a bad reading? I just see my corals growing. Nothing is doing bad. Well, it depends on the type of corals you have, and if it helps, my reef is at 80 ppm right now as well. So it is something that corals can adapt and get used to, but it can finally hit a point where it's too much for too long, and you can start to see declining of corals or even fish health. So it'd be better to bring it down. Ideally, we want to be somewhere around 20 ppm or lower. Back in the day, we were always recommending something super low, like 3 ppm, but really 15 to 20 would be a really good sweet spot to be. And the best, quickest way to get the nitrates down is to do 50% water changes, and that will cut it in half every single time. So if you do a 50% water change today on 80 ppm, you'll be at 40. If you do another water change in 2 days, you'll be at 20. If you do another water change in 2 days, you'll be at 10. So you see, just 3 giant water changes could make a big difference. And I did that last week, and I changed 200 gallons in my tank, and I got down to 80 because it was higher than 80. So I've got to mix up another batch to bring it down even lower. Rumbifer, I said I will do a live stream in front of the reef one week and then in the studio the next week. It's going to be like that every single time. Just get used to it. Or check out the videos and pictures on my Instagram. They're every single day. Oh, look at this. So I think that says Slacker says, I was fortunate only to lose power for a day when Hurricane Ian visited Florida this week. I hope others are doing well, as well. A lot of people have lost power. A lot of people have lost their tanks. A lot of people lost their homes. This was a really bad storm, and the only information I got was little snippets from YouTube and some of my friends posting on Facebook. But I think in the coming weeks, we're going to learn a lot more what happened, and it's going to be pretty devastating for a lot of people. That was a bad storm. At one point, I know one place it hit Cat 5, but then everywhere else has said it was Cat 4. But the difference between Cat 4 and Cat 5 was a difference of 2 miles an hour. It was that close. And I was wondering about the people that have a lot of them are used to the storms. They're like, okay, we have hurricanes, we're prepared, our homes are built to withstand them. But the wind was like 150 miles an hour. And the storm was traveling at 8 miles an hour. It was crawling across the state. And it was, so the property was being hit with 150 miles an hour of wind for hours. It just blew through like a storm does. It was pounding at these buildings for hours till it finally moved away. And yes, the more it got inland, the weaker the storm became because it got away from the water. There's that. But I was wondering, what happened to all the solar panels that people have been putting on the roofs? Do those hold in 150 mile an hour wind? I was like, that was the first thing that occurred to me today. I was like, did solar panels just go flying everywhere because everyone wants to go solar these days? And I'm not sure how they're bolted onto the house, to where they could withstand Hurricane Ian. So if you know the answer, I'd love to hear it. I do know some people were doing different tricks to keep their reefs alive, using power inverters and batteries, and some had generators. Some people had their generators burn up and die like mine did last year, to where, you know, they were stuck and they literally just had to watch their tanks die because there was no power and they didn't know when they'd get power again. Others are taking water out and pouring it back in, you know, with buckets, or scooping it or stirring it with their hand, trying to mix up some air into the water. But then the other problem was like, okay, so you get a little bit of air into the tank, but the temperatures were a problem with power outages and the weather being whatever it is. The place is getting too hot, the tank is warming up, or it's too cool and the tanks are cooling off and you can't warm them up because you have no way to heat them. So it's a real thing. And that's the hardest part of this hobby, is controlling the elements, both in your home and outside of your home indefinitely. And it's devastating. It's really hard. And, you know, I've got battery backups, I've got a generator, you know, I've got the city providing power. Those are my 3 ways of making things happen. And I've been fortunate in all the years I've been reef keeping, and I've been doing this for 25 years. I have not had any tank just die of a lack of power. Came really close last year during the ice storm, super close. Fortunately, I had someone within 2 miles of me offer me a brand new in the box generator at 1 a.m. when I thought that's it. I mean, I just figured there's no way I was going to save my reef. I got super lucky. So, you know, planning goes a long way, but you're going to need a little bit of luck as well. I mean, that's the only way to make this stuff work. You can't do it all on your own. Sometimes you need a few things to fall in place for you. But the more preparation, the better. So that is kind of it for today. How are we doing on time? Oh, I don't know. The thing reset. So it says on my thing, we've been talking 20 minutes. I know that's not true. I do appreciate that you guys all sat through this, since I didn't actually have an official topic today. But I do want to emphasize or round this up with the same speech I do every single week, and that is to test your water today. And grab your test kits and use them, because water tests save lives. And if we test our water, we can avoid losing livestock, whether it's your favorite fish or a coral you really love. Staying on top of the water parameters is key. Studying your tank and keeping it clean, making sure everything is operational, is paramount to having success. And then, like I said, a little bit of luck doesn't hurt as well. Thank you again for tuning in today. And I want to remind you, there is no live stream next week because I will be in Chicago. And then we'll just do another live stream the week after that. And it'll be back in front of the tank again. And that'll make one user really happy. All right, guys, have a great day. And I will see you in 2 weeks, unless I run into you in Chicago. Bye.